This show is sponsored by Liquid IV. Like many people, I've come into the new year full of hopes and aspirations for the next 12 months. Maybe, like me, you're anxiously pacing the floor waiting for the F1 season to begin, or perhaps you've set yourself a more regular fitness goal, like running your first marathon or commuting to work by bike. Whatever you plan to do in 2025, come into your own way with extraordinary hydration from Liquid IV. Powered by Live Hydroscience, Liquid IV helps you break the mould. Liquid IV is so easy and convenient to tear, pour and enjoy, and it comes in several fantastic flavours, like their new Hydration Multiplier Sugar-Free Raspberry Lemonade, and other winners like White Peach and Rainbow Sherbet. As a regular flyer, I know how easy it is to become dehydrated almost without knowing it when you're travelling. That's why I always take Liquid IV on overseas trips. It's more than just a drink, and it's scientifically formulated to hydrate better than water alone. Just one stick and 16 ounces of water provides 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink, plus 8 essential vitamins and nutrients. And what's more, it's always non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free and soy-free. Embrace your ritual with extraordinary hydration from Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code THERACE at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code THERACE at liquidiv.com.
As you've probably heard by now, we've teamed up with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for our listeners each week. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code THEATHLETIC, and you'll get a 1-year subscription to The Athletic, plus up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code THEATHLETIC. Make your first deposit of at least $10, place your first bet on any game, and claim your voucher for a 1-year subscription to The Athletic. See BetMGM.com for terms. U.S. promotional offers not available in D.C., Mississippi, New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 in New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona. 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts. 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. 1-800-270-7117 for confidential help in Michigan. 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code THEATHLETIC and you'll get a 1-year subscription to The Athletic, plus up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager.
Auto insurance can all seem the same until it comes time to use it. So don't get stuck paying more for less coverage. Switch to USAA Auto Insurance and you could start saving money in no time. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply.
The Athletic.
The race is on, and Yuki Tsunoda is set to take Liam Lawson's place for the Japanese Grand Prix in a switch that's unprecedented, even by Red Bull's high standards for driver chaos. So why is it happening so soon, and can Tsunoda cut it? I'm Edd Straw, and joining me to untangle this amazing turn of events is Jon Noble. Oh, John, astounding, frankly, this is, isn't it? I think it's not necessarily a surprise that Lawson at Red Bull hasn't worked out, but for it not to have worked out after 2 races is pretty amazing. And although it's not officially confirmed yet, all the indications are it's going to happen.
Yeah, it is quite remarkable, especially because it's quite interesting. I wrote a piece this morning just about why we've ended up in this mess, and it went back to a Christmas lunch that I think you were at last year with Christian Horner, and you actually pushed him on some questions. Why have you picked Lawson? He talked about he's got a similar style to Max Verstappen. He gets his elbows out. He's very confident. And they didn't believe that Tsunoda, had the potential that Lawson had, and the fact that they felt that even though the pair were very even matched on speed, they felt Lawson had potential. But reading again all the quotes, it was all based on this vision and dream of where Lawson could be in the future. It wasn't based on where he was now. And I think this is where this mismatch has appeared. So whatever data they had in last December, it's all out the window now.
What astounds me, though, is that, we knew it was a bit of a hit and hope. But if you a few months ago think, yeah, this guy's got the right robust mentality, if you think a few months ago, yeah, he's got the right style, etc., and you genuinely think that, then you don't, after 2 admittedly terrible weekends, change course completely and go for the guy that you overlooked. So for me, it just sums up how flimsy the whole approach is. It just seems absolutely astounding. I guess you can say, if what they've seen from Lawson so far has shown he definitely can't do it, then why throw good money after bad? But for me, this just reflects really, really badly on Red Bull as a whole.
Yeah, but I can't quite understand that. They must have been through the data last year. They must have analysed performances, analysed him against Tsunoda, analysed race pace, looked at him on the simulator, looked at him in tests. So they knew exactly what they were getting. They would have known the strengths and weaknesses. If you were stood by that decision and he's not gone with the car, then surely the mindset is to work with him, work around him, try and solve the problems and get him back to a point that you thought he could get. It's not like those, sometimes random footballer stories you get where a team's been hoodwinked into buying an unknown player from an unknown region they know nothing about and have been lied to, and then they bring them on to play a match and realise they're utterly useless, and then realise they've been completely deceived and it was a massive error. They knew Liam Lawson. They're aware of what he could do. They know his strengths. They knew his weaknesses. They knew where he was at. So to come to this conclusion after 2 races, unless there's a miraculous piece of data that just shows that something has gone drastically wrong and he's completely incompatible with his car, it is all a little bit baffling.
Yeah, extraordinary, isn't it? And although we don't know the exact plan, they haven't said it, we assume that Lawson will find himself back in a Racing Bulls car because they've got nobody else alongside Isaac Hadjar. So he's still kind of there in the Red Bull family, and he will probably find it easier there. We'll get into why Lawson was struggling shortly, but it just seems like a desperate shuffling of the pack. And this problem, you can trace this Red Bull driver problem back a very, very long way. At the kind of latest to Ricciardo walking away and them never really making the right decision to change things. But it just feels to me like just the same thing happening again, because I can't get over the fact of whatever you think about Tsunoda, and Tsunoda's got a lot of ability. I'm really interested to see how he goes because he's got a bit about him, Tsunoda. But if they felt Tsunoda wasn't the guy 4 months ago, 5 months ago, then there's no reason why they think he's the right person now. It's just he happens to be the only alternative, which is a bizarre situation to get yourself into.
Yeah, unless there's a miraculous piece of AI computer data that shows Liam Lawson can only drive a car that understeers and Yuki Tsunoda can only drive a car that's got massive oversteer, then there's no reason to suggest that Yuki is an automatic answer and that he will suddenly be matching Max Verstappen's pace at Suzuka. I can just see him having the same difficulties, the same challenges. And then thrown on top of that is the pressure of this all happening at your home Grand Prix, which is quite remarkable, really. So, I mean, in some respects, whatever happens, Red Bull are going to be proven wrong, because either they were wrong not to have taken Tsunoda in the first place, being aware of what the strengths and weaknesses are, if he does well. And if he doesn't do well, then they've been wrong not to give Lawson more time and work him out and push him forwards. So it is a fascinating dynamic. And I'm also intrigued that if Lawson gets in that Racing Bulls car, which looks pretty swift, seems to be quite well balanced, can be quick, and dumps it into Q3, as is easily possible, then where does that leave the Red Bull situation with its second car?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what's very, very clear is that the Red Bull car is capable of being quick. It's got the grip, it's got the downforce, but it's very, very, very difficult to thread that needle to get the pace out of it. But what astounds me is, well, actually, many things about this astounds me. But we know that one of the concerns they've got with Yuki Tsunoda is the mentality, and is he a little bit too good, almost sort of unstable? Does he not have that full control? And obviously, it's a mental game, this, isn't it? So they have had concerns about that. So to fling him in for the Japanese Grand Prix, as you say, the most high pressure, high profile, intensive possible situation seems very, very, very strange, because that would seem like the worst possible thing to do. They've wasted the opportunity to give him the winter to prepare. They've wasted the opportunity to let him run in pre-season testing and have the first few races in the car. And then they're just going to sort of pitch him in. Yuki will back himself to do well, but it seems like an approach that's entirely out of keeping with everything that we know Red Bull have thought before.
Yeah, because they're such a brilliant team on almost every other aspect. They can produce great cars. Sure, they've not had the greatest of starts this season, and they had some wobbles last year. But generally, or not, if the engine in the back's decent, they're a very decent team. Strategy-wise, they've been one of the best ever. They rarely make big blunders on strategy. They know how to play the political game. They're very good on marketing. So they tick all these boxes, but there just seems to be this consistent problem that they don't seem to have a solution with on their second car. And it's primarily focused on this strange belief of not having kind of two A-star number one drivers alongside each other. The easiest solution for them last kind of Monaco Grand Prix time, just before they made the mistake of re-signing Checo Perez because they thought this would relieve the pressure on him and make him brilliant, which didn't happen, would have been to sign Carlos Sainz.
Yeah, that would have been the obvious choice. And I think Red Bull needs to take a long, hard look at the thought processes and the strategy and the approach it takes to filling that second car, because they need to not only think about the overall quality of the driver, but also the characteristics that might allow them to get good performance out of a car that Max Verstappen is able to. We'll get back to the podcast in a moment, but first, let me tell you about Grammarly. Your time and expertise are valuable, and with professionals spending nearly half the work week on written communication, focus is one of the most important things to have at work. With Grammarly as your AI writing partner, you can stay focused and get through your work faster with relevant, real-time suggestions wherever you write. As a journalist and podcast host, I'm constantly writing and rewriting copy and drawing up scripts. It's part of the job, and Grammarly helps make it faster with AI prompts, tone suggestions, and more. And what's more, you can enjoy it with peace of mind with Grammarly's enterprise-grade security and its business model that doesn't sell your data. Experience the gold standard of responsible AI with Grammarly, a tool that 93% of professionals report helps them get more work done. So what are you waiting for? Get more done with Grammarly. Download Grammarly free at grammarly.com/podcast. That's grammarly.com/podcast.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Today at T-Mobile, I'm joined by a special co-anchor.
What up, everybody? It's your boy, Big Snoop Deal Double G.
Snoop, where can people go to find great deals?
Head to T-Mobile.com and get 4 iPhone 16s with Apple Intelligence on us, plus 4 lines for $25.
That's quite a deal, Snoop. And when you switch to T-Mobile, you can save versus the other big guys' comparable plans plus streaming.
Respect. We up out of here.
See how you can save on wireless and streaming versus the other big guys at T-Mobile.com/switch. Apple Intelligence requires iOS 18.1 or later.
Well, let's get into a little bit more depth on Lawson's struggles. Now, we know how good Verstappen is at getting the pace out of the car. We know that in order to get that turn in and that rotation, you need a driver who can be extremely manipulative on the brakes and the way they load the car up on turning. If you thread the needle with this car, it's got the grip, but it's not well balanced, it's not well connected, and it needs a driver of Verstappen's excellence to get the pace out of it. But Lawson has struggled badly to achieve that, hasn't he?
No, but it's not. But then I looked at his Q1 lap in Shanghai, for example, just to see, because he talked about it's not every corner, it's not every lap. And if you look at his lap, there were kind of 2 corners where he was losing all his time. It was the first sequence around kind of turn 1 into whatever order they number it, turn 2, turn 3. He lost a lot of time. But then from turn 3 all the way through to the corner onto the back straight, actually he gained on Verstappen. Was competitive, wasn't bleeding time, but then something went away in that long right-hander, so he was slower coming out of there, and then lost all the time because he lost momentum all the way down to the hairpin, and it basically destroyed the lap until the end. So it's not as if he's off the pace everywhere, it's just in certain corners. But I think this is Max's ability to get speed out of the car in all circumstances, all corners, all speed ranges. And when it's got trouble, he can much easier cope with it than someone like Lawson.
Yeah, I think the point is that you've got a car there that not only requires great manipulation to get it to do what you want, but also great adaptability and a capacity to react to those tiny little signals as to what it's going to do, because it has got such a narrow window. And in that regard, it's a very tough ask for a driver like Lawson, who obviously he's been very, very much at pains to say that he's not making excuses, that he knows he's got to deliver, he knows the pressure's on, he understands that. But at the same time, it's clear he's got an almost impossible hand, because he had 11 Grand Prix experience before this weekend. So you're asking somebody to do something that's phenomenally difficult without having that kind of historical data bank to lean on even to make the most of it. You know, it's not that fundamentally he's a diabolically slow racing driver, which is what he's looked like, because we know he isn't. So it's almost like it's an impossible situation for Lawson. And I guess that's the argument that Red Bull will make. They'll say, well, we saw over these 2 races in testing that he's got no chance, he's getting nowhere, he's not able to adapt. So what's the point of keep hitting our heads against a brick wall and putting him through that, because we know he's going to be falling in Q1 and not really getting anywhere. But it just sums up, it's fundamentally a car and technical problem, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think this may well be the thing that speaks in Tsunoda's favour, is that he's had experience of all these different types of ground effect cars. He's seen the good ones and the bad ones. He's seen when it hits trouble. He's seen when they work, what corners they don't work, what variations they need, what he feedbacks. And it was interesting when he did the Abu Dhabi test last year. The one thing the team said about him was his technical feedback was good and positive. So maybe the case ultimately is that Lawson had no answers and couldn't really define what was going wrong, couldn't really point to where the issues were, because he hasn't got that data bank of knowledge that Tsunoda's got. So they need someone with more experience just to come in and give them a bit of direction. Because this is the other thing they've lacked over recent years is someone anywhere close to Verstappen in terms of delivering the technical feedback that's needed to push this car forwards for the team, not just forwards for a car that Max Verstappen can drive.
Yeah, obviously what Max was complaining about in the past, if you look back to last year, he was saying, well, he'd been complaining about what the car was doing in 23. But of course, if you're the team, you're saying, well, hang on a minute, he's winning every race, he's getting the pace out of it. This is just a racing driver not being happy that the car isn't doing everything 100% of the time the way he wants all the time. But what he was actually doing is he was kind of keeping it up there and mitigating the problems in a way that made the team think that everything was fine. And it was interesting last year, because I remember Sergio Perez, it might have been at Monza, saying that, and actually with the problems we've had, some of the people in the team have said to me, actually we see what you were saying about the car before was actually right, and maybe we should listen to you a little bit, positioning himself a little bit like the canary in the coal mine. But I also know that when he said that, there were people at Red Bull who thought, that's not quite what we think about what your feedback was showing. So this you can actually plot this situation back, technically, a couple of years, even to that point in 23, when they were dominating still, when Verstappen was winning everything. But the traits and the problems and the limitations in this car were there underlying.
Yeah, I think this isn't a problem that suddenly manifests itself with the RB21. The problems also didn't, just come from the RB20. I think they did exist with the RB19. They just hadn't been exposed by the pace advantage the team had. But those kind of early warning signs were in the system about kind of riding over curbs and some sensitivities in certain speed ranges. And I think this has just got exacerbated. So it's plotted down a path of a very difficult car that has its weaknesses in certain areas, which is all fine if you're 2-3 tenths clear in front, because it doesn't really make a difference. But when you get to the scenario that F1 is now, where 1 tenth can be the difference between pole, even the second row, and a couple of tenths can be the difference between Q3, Q2, and less than a second now is the difference between back of the grid and comfortably getting through to Q3, then all these elements kind of all add together. So it's almost a perfect storm of a scenario where dumping anyone into that second Red Bull seat at the moment is far from ideal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that ultimately it's pretty ruinous for Lawson's career. Ultimately, he will go into that Racing Bulls car. We have seen people recover from being dropped by Red Bull. Obviously, Alex Albon, Pierre Gasly are the two good examples of that. But equally, we also know Red Bull doesn't like going back, does it, to drivers? And I suspect they might. I doubt they're sending Lawson back there to rehabilitate and think we could use him down the line. And so it'll also have had that impact on the rest of the field in terms of looking at Lawson as an option. They're going to look as much at this 2-race spell at Red Bull as they will at whatever he does at Racing Bulls. But I guess he's just got to use that, because I do think he's got quite a good mentality and he's quite robust. So I suspect Lawson will, at least assuming he is in the Racing Bulls car, which he should be, I do think he should be able to regroup and actually say, look, I am a decent racing driver. I'm not an incompetent person who puts a Q3 car out in Q1 and finishes 16th all the time. So I'm also interested to see Lawson, how he rebuilds himself at Racing Bulls, even though I think probably, as far as being a Red Bull racing driver, the die is cast for good now.
Yeah, I think there's two things that speak for Lawson at the moment. First of all is that he's very honest and forthright about stuff. He's not pretended he's not done a bad job. He's not in denial about what's happened. When I spoke to him at the pen at the weekend, there was no kind of hiding behind excuses. There was no pretending everything's right and it's everyone else's fault. He owned up to everything. He made some improvements in the sprint race, so it's not good enough. I'm in a Red Bull. I need to be doing what Max is doing. And he's talked about how hard it is, how tough it is, how he doesn't get on with the car. So I think the fact he's accepted things rather than, pointing the blame at someone else, saying, I'm innocent, I've been screwed over by the team, I think is very positive for him. And secondly, you can argue he's going into a car that should allow him to shine much better. And you well know in F1, you're only as good as your last race. If he rocks up in that Racing Bulls in Suzuka, puts it P5, P6 on the grid, delivers a similar result in the race, good haul of points, and looks brilliant, then where does that leave everybody? I mean, how then do you judge Liam Lawson? How do you judge wherever Yuki Tsunoda ends up? And what did Red Bull take from all of that? If it's a fascinating dynamic just to see how all that plays out and how we judge it all.
Well, I think there's little doubt that Liam Lawson will have a better weekend in the Racing Bulls car at Suzuka than he would in the Red Bull. And I don't mean that relative to the pace of the car, because the Red Bull does have a higher pace ceiling. Whether that makes it a better car is another question, because it's so hard to extract that pace. You can argue that the Racing Bulls, while a little bit slower at peak, it is a better car because it's more around. But that's the strange thing, because if you're Lawson, you're probably thinking, actually, do you know what? I could have quite a good weekend now in this scenario. So he's just got to kind of latch onto that and just treat that Red Bull racing experience as almost a bad dream.
I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does, without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
This episode is brought to you by Walmart. New beauty is in bloom at Walmart, and it's all about springtime radiance. From Drybar, Tula Skincare, and hundreds more available online. Walmart has the premium brands you want and this season's on-trend products for flawless, glossy hair and hydrated skin. Big name beauty brands? Check. The things you love? Check. Find trending spring beauty and all you need to look and feel gorgeous at Walmart, on app and online.
There are people out there all across the country pushing boundaries to grow the game of golf. Like champion speed golfer Lauren Cupp, who plays faster than anyone else. And Will Lowry, whose work in the golf community inspires more kids to get into the game. As a champion partner of the Masters, Bank of America supports everyone determined to find out what's possible. In golf and in life. What would you like the power to do? Bank of America. Bank of America N.A. member FDIC, copyright 2025, Bank of America Corporation, all rights reserved.
Let's look at Yuki Tsunoda now, John. He's had a really strong start to the season. he's progressively got better through his years in Formula One. Last year was a good, strong, convincing season. We know he's capable of being quick. We know he's capable of getting good race results, because the fact that he hasn't had points, well, he got points in the sprint race in China, but the fact that he hasn't had points in Australia and China in the Grand Prix themselves wasn't down to his own performance. It was down to the way the races played out strategically. So he's certainly a driver who's got the experience, and having driven the car in Abu Dhabi at the back end of last year's Red Bull, that is, he has got a level of confidence about him. And he also knows that this is his opportunity, isn't it? This is what he's wanted for years.
Yeah, this is the big chance in probably not ideal circumstances. But I think if you're a top line F1 driver, and you've got belief in yourself and conviction you can do the job, then you take opportunities like this. You don't turn it down thinking, oh, maybe this is going to be difficult for me. Maybe if I don't get out of Q1, then everyone's going to start kind of thinking I'm not up to it. I think you've got to take it and see how it rolls. But I think Yuki's also in a different place this year. I spoke to Laurent Mekies at the end of the Bahrain test, and we were just talking about the winter and how things had been. And he was raving about Yuki. He said he came back from the winter kind of a piece of himself over not getting that Red Bull seat, because I think in effect that was his last chance to get it. He'd done everything he could do. He'd shone for I can't remember what they were called last year, RB. He'd shone for RB. He'd impressed in the test. It improved a lot in terms of his temperament and the radio conversations and working with the team. So there'd been all this development. So he'd done all he could, and he still lost out to a teammate who hadn't blown him away. And I think he'd accepted it, just realised there was nothing he could do. And his best chance of doing well in the future was to knuckle down, get on with the job and be quick. And that's exactly what he's done this year. It's been really, really impressive in qualifying. Should have more points, but twice now strategies cost him quite badly. And I think he's got the temperament. I think he's calmed down a lot. And it's going to be, as you mentioned before, it's going to be the biggest test of his F1 career to be in that Red Bull at Suzuka. I cannot imagine what Suzuka is going to be like next week, and it's going to be nuts.
Yeah, it's going to be absolutely fantastic. Great for the Japanese fans. I think there's two things about Tsunoda. One, I think the concerns about how he is in the car, I think, when he first tested for that team in Abu Dhabi, they couldn't believe how vocal he was over the radio. He's come a very, very long way since then. He's accepted he needs to have that control in the cockpit. He's talked about it extensively. He's worked at it. Now, I think sometimes people hear the radio messages and think he sounds panicked or whatever, but I don't think that's the case. Often it's just a question of clarity, communication. So I think he'll be okay on that score. I'm quite interested in how he adapts technique-wise as a driver, because one of the advantages he's got is kind of fundamentally as a driver, he's a sort of late-braking, attack-the-corner kind of driver. That's his sort of default style, which won't work with this car. However, he has gone through that process of understanding how to broaden his window a bit. Certainly when Ricciardo came in to what was called AlphaTauri at that time, when he first came in, the progress that they made, there was a little bit more of understanding that you don't necessarily have to have that sort of approach with the corner. So I think he's slightly broadened his window and adaptability, and Ricciardo's played a part in that, interestingly. So I think that puts him in a better place to make the most of this opportunity than had he been pitched into a Red Bull, say, 18 months ago, for the sake of argument. So he's in an interesting place because he's still a young driver, but he's got a decent bedrock of experience. He knows how everything works there. So I'm not going to say he's going to jump in and thrive and make it work, because it's a really tough assignment, but I actually think he could. I really do think he is a driver who might well be able to make this work. And I think it would be brilliant if he would, because he's worked so hard in Formula One since he came in, and it would be a brilliant story if he can actually just slot in and do a decent job in what is an extremely difficult car to extract the pace from.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that's in his favour is the fact that Lawson's performances have been so bad, qualifying 18th ahead of one Haas in Australia, then 20th and 20th, that Yuki, it's hard to do worse than that. You'd have to be even more, primarily you'd have to be even more off the back of the grid than Lawson was to be any worse. So if he can even just get through to Q2, for example, or just show signs of some decent pace, then I think that will be enough as a stepping stone to move forward. So it's not as if he's suddenly come into a team where the teammate's been racing wheel to wheel with Max Verstappen and he needs to deliver a podium finish, or it's not enough. I think the bar's quite low in terms of what he needs to do. And I think Red Bull will also want to portray an image of Yuki having done a good job with whatever he's done. Because if you remember after Australia, Christian Horner made a big thing about Lawson setting the second fastest race lap when all the factors were there that didn't quite make that as impressive a performance as it perhaps should have been. So I think, a small step forward would probably be enough for Red Bull to feel that, Yuki is the right man for the job. But, who knows? Maybe his driving style, his characteristics, his technical feedback, his understanding just clicks with that Red Bull and he can extract the pace. Even if it's over one lap in qualifying, it would make all the difference.
Yeah, well, he's got that advantage, as you say. If he were to make Q2 and then come home 10th or something, 50 seconds behind Verstappen, on paper that wouldn't be great, but actually it would be seen as a pretty good effort for a starting point, particularly at a tricky track like Suzuka. So, a good opportunity there for him to try and make it work for him. And also, I've seen people saying, it'd be a poison chalice for Tsunoda, it could ruin his career. But if you look at where Tsunoda is, he's probably in his last season in Red Bull's second team anyway, and he's looking for an alternative elsewhere. When we did our podcast predicting the driver market, we had Tsunoda probably on the sidelines for next year as a third driver. Not because he doesn't merit a place in Formula One, because I think he does, but because it was difficult to see exactly where the opportunity would open up. So from that perspective, I think that it's a great opportunity for him to change that, because if he succeeds, he could be in a Red Bull car in 2026. If he does a good job, that will up his value to potential other teams if Red Bull decide to go with someone else for next year. So I'm not going to say it's win-win for Tsunoda, because he's got a tough challenge on his hands. But I think he's got now his hands on the weaponry he needs to maybe change that course of his career and go from a driver who risks being on the sidelines and maybe not getting back in, which would be a little bit harsh, to someone who can say, right, I've got the chance to go in there and show what I can do. Because imagine if he performs decently, imagine if he performs well and they say, he's adapted to the car well. He can do, even if it's not everything Verstappen can, he can do a good amount of what Verstappen can do. That would be so profoundly reputation enhancing. He'd go from a driver who might be struggling to get in elsewhere, even though there's some interest, into one who's in demand.
Yeah, and I think it says a lot, and it's a truth of Formula One, that when opportunity comes, if you're a top F1 driver, you take that opportunity and you make the most of it, because proper chances don't come along very often. If we go back to Saudi Arabia last year, Ollie Behrman, he had one chance to impress, thrown in ridiculously difficult circumstances. No one would have been shocked if he'd, binned that car in the race, if he'd struggled in qualifying, if he'd tooled around at the back and done absolutely nothing. It wouldn't have been a big shock because it's tremendously difficult circumstances. But to deliver the way he did there, reputation's enhanced. It was a brilliant performance, and it probably laid the foundations. I'm not saying he wouldn't have got the Haas drive without Saudi Arabia, but I think it definitely set the ball rolling and contributed to the circumstances. And I think it's the same for Yuki now. He's going to have one shot at this. He's got, 20, how many races have we got this year? 23, 24?
24 total, so he's got 22 left.
22 races, potentially, to impress, as long as Red Bull don't make another decision after 2 races. But this is the chance he needs. This is a chance to prove what he can do. It's a chance to erase all the doubts, wipe away all the questions, and prove to the world, is Yuki Tsunoda, a top-line Formula One driver, or is he not?
And I think that's a great thing, because I think Tsunoda's mindset will be in the right place for that. He'll feel like he's got the chance to, and I think he'll probably give a good account of himself. Whether that'll be enough, we'll see. But he's got real ability, Tsunoda, and I think it would be a great story for Formula One if he can succeed. Imagine if he goes to Japan and has a good weekend. That would be absolutely fantastic. But doubtless, Isaac Hadjar's probably sitting there thinking, I could be in the Red Bull by Saudi Arabia at the rate things are going. So who knows how things might change. But anyway, thanks, John, for jumping on to chat about all things Red Bull. We're waiting for the official confirmation of that. But what a story that's been early in the season. I don't think anyone saw this coming quite so early on. But it's going to be a huge talking point ahead of the Japanese Grand Prix. So stay with us for everything you need to know from the world of Formula One.
The Athletic.